You're quitting? I stared at my old grandfather in disbelief. The man who I have known as a hunter my entire life has just told me he's done for good. Yeah? Is it really that surprising? He chuckled. I just stared at him a bit sadly. My mind was running on full power, trying to remember all the stories of his quests I had heard as a child. The boar he killed just as it was about to skewer him with its tusks. The deer he and his crew tracked for hours before finally finishing him for good. The goulash my grandma would make with the meat he'd bring back. So many memories. Honestly, felt like a magical part of my childhood died off with his will for hunting. I mean, kind of. You've been doing it for as long as I've been alive, so... He leaned back in his wooden rocking chair. His arm made a loud pop noise as he stretched in, and he smiled at my obvious wince. These old bones just aren't what they used to be, and it's been getting harder to pay for all that. Hunting is an expensive hobby, kid, and retirement isn't so generous with money. I laughed. He laughed along, the topic quickly changing to something else, and the whole hunting debacle was quickly forgotten. Instead of hunting, my grandfather decided to take up fishing. It was another thing he very much liked doing, but with the absence of his other hobby and no need to go to work anymore, it became something he did regularly. It didn't require as much agility. It was rather cheap, at least when compared to hunting. Sometimes he'd bring along friends, sometimes he'd go alone. Sometimes he would even meet entirely new people. I later learned that fishermen tend to be very friendly and easy to strike up a conversation with. He was already doing it for months when, be it fate, or simply the fact I had nothing better to do, I decided to tag along. I ended up having a lot of fun, and went along with him many more times. The joy on my grandpa's face when I, his oldest grandchild, accepted a hobby so special to him was honestly something that could cure diseases. Him being happy made me happy, and I honestly felt as if I had developed a new kind of bond with him that wasn't there before. Me and my grandpa became a fishing duo to be feared. Our whole family would enjoy the spoils of our adventures. Fish soup, fried fish, barbecue fish, fish just baked over a fire like we're Neanderthals. It was all so delicious. Many laughs and good memories were made during these feasts. My grandpa refuses to take me anywhere anymore. I think he partially blames himself for what we experienced that day. I'm not gonna lie, sad as fuck. I miss fishing. I miss nature. I miss the exhilarating feeling of pulling a fish out of water and the disappointment of pulling out an empty hook with no bait. Most of all, though, I miss my grandpa. It was a beautiful sunny day like any other when my grandpa called me asking if I wanted to tag along on another trip of his. I put on my worst clothes, grabbed the straw sombrero my grandpa bought me for such sunny days, and rushed out the door. He was already waiting for me in the car. I waved my mom goodbye, promised her I'd be careful, and the two of us were on our merry way. I wanted to go to an entirely new place today, he told me. My eyes lit up at the idea. Where's this place? It's the same river we always go to, just more upstream. Me and Joe went there a couple of days ago, and a bunch of great catches. Fish as big as your entire forearm. Honestly, I feel like there were several red flags I should have noticed before we even got to the place. Hindsight is 20/20 though. The first thing that really struck me was seeing the "Now entering Greenwood Forest. Welcome" sign. I laughed when I spotted it, turned to my grandpa. Did you see that? Someone's been messing with people. What do you mean? The sign we just passed? It's the same sign as the one in front of Greenwood. You know, the forest on the complete opposite side of town. He commented on how that is in fact a funny prank to pull on people, although the green foliage we drove through seemed incredibly familiar, and reminded me of the very place that was, again, supposed to be on the other side of town. It made me a little bit uncomfortable. I checked Google Maps on my phone, and it confirmed we were driving in the opposite direction, far away from the forest. The unease lessened a bit. Perhaps the similarity just confused me. I put my phone away and stared at the endless green outside the window. Not long after, we arrived to a beautiful clearing split apart by a deep blue river soaring through it. I did a little dog whistle upon getting out of the car, commenting on how beautiful the place is. My grandfather seemed oddly confused, and he was rapidly looking around like he's looking for something. I don't think this is the place. This isn't the same place I was at last time, and I was sure we took the right road. He mumbled to himself. I patted him on the shoulder. Maybe we just took a wrong turn. With all that green in there, it's easy to get confused. He shrugged. I guess you're right. Place seems as good as any, though. He took the equipment out of the car. We set everything up and began fishing. Despite our casual chatting, the whole atmosphere seemed incredibly off. I can honestly say I was more unnerved in that well-lit clearing, with nobody but my grandpa around for miles, than I was in my large city in the dead of night, not knowing who or what was watching me. I kept turning around expecting to see something, but I never did. All that I saw were thorny bushes and what I later realized were unnaturally dense trees. It took me a good half an hour to realize another thing that was bugging me. Hey, don't you think it's kind of dead out here? He nodded. It's oddly quiet, I'll tell you that. You know that's usually a sign of a predator being nearby, yeah. But I don't think anything larger than a fox would be living out here, honestly. And I think the two of us shouldn't have much trouble taking it down if needed. He laughed. But it was just the noise. There was absolutely no bugs. If you've ever gone fishing, you'll know what I mean. Flies buzzing around the fish bucket, mosquitoes so powerful in numbers that they could drain a whole deer clean of its blood. This time there was nothing. As thankful as I was, because let's face it, bugs are annoying, it unnerved me. The fact that no other people were around either didn't help. I was so used to our regular spot where we would be surrounded by so many people that being all alone wasn't calming in the slightest. Around half an hour in, my grandpa caught something big on his blinker. He reeled it in. With me yelling in excitement, we both kind of went quiet after finally dragging the thing to shore. It was a fish. It felt more like multiple fish. I wish I took a photo or something, because I really don't know how to convey it. They were medium-sized fish, a normal kind we constantly find in that river. I can't remember the name. They were merged together into a literal fish ball. You'd make out one whole fish, and it would have like two more horizontally sticking out of its torso. They were so perfectly merged together that you'd think it was some sort of birth defect. Which, fine. I've seen two-headed fish before, but there were at least 10 fish in that clump, maybe even more. Some had only the tips of their fins sticking out of the weirdest places, and some were whole fish. And they were all wriggling in agony. My grandpa kicked the whole bundle back into the water. Why'd you do that? We should have at least taken a photo or something. Now nobody's gonna believe we saw it. It scared me, whatever that was. It's not natural. I know, but still, it's a rare occurrence to see something like that. What are the odds? No, I meant it as in the water here is Chernobyl level polluted anyway. There's no way this occurred naturally. But all the other fish we caught were fine. And yet we continued fishing. As time passed, the feeling of being watched intensified. I barely even kept watching my rod. I was too occupied staring at the empty space behind me. Sometimes I felt like I saw something, just barely there, toying with me. It knew I could see it, but it made me question myself. The silence was deafening. There was absolutely no sound. A couple of times I would intentionally cough, just to confirm I haven't gone deaf. I looked at the trees, shaking gently in the breeze. It made no sound. The fish we pulled out kept getting less and less normal. Soon we were pulling out only fucked up abominations. A fish with its head perfectly split in half, but still alive. A fish that appeared normal when caught, but exploded 2 minutes after we put it in the bucket with the rest. Fish guts flew everywhere. A fish that made audible moans as we pulled it out. Got too unbearable, so we smashed its head with a rock. It died screaming. A fish that vomited out what seemed to be worms. Can fish even vomit? I don't know. I was terrified. My attention was occupied by whatever the hell was stalking us from behind, and the constant array of Looney Tune-esque fish we just kept catching. There were so many. One kept coming after the other. I wanted to cry. I wanted to leave so bad. I looked at my grandpa, his face a mixture of confusion and fear. I'd have assumed mine looked kind of like that, except worse. We should leave. Hearing those words coming from my grandpa's mouth were the breaking point. I started crying, half from fear and half from relief. He began quickly putting away the rods, our folding chairs, the bucket. Just as I was about to pull my fishing rod out of the water, the little float on top of the hook jiggled. Then it dived underwater and started to swim away. Me and my grandpa exchanged looks, and he nodded at me. I understood. He was basically telling me, go on, reel it in. And I did. After a few seconds of processing, I screamed and dropped the rod, which would have slid into the river if it weren't for my grandpa. I fell onto the grass, recoiling as if something was trying to chase me. I heaved and I gagged. I cried harder. My grandpa looked at me sympathetically. We have to pull it out. No. I don't want to. He grabbed my trembling shoulders and looked me in the eyes. His gaze was gentle, caring. I felt relief. Although still scared, in that moment I realized I was not alone. My grandpa, the big, scary hunter, would protect me, no matter what. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But finding an arm, maybe there's a body down there. I don't want to find out. I don't either, but we need to. We can't just leave it like that. We need to call someone. The police. We need to let someone know. As much as I hated it, he was right. That might have been somebody's family member. What if we just found the remains of a murder? I sniffed. Felt an odd sense of relief. To be honest, out of all the things that happened, the bodies seemed fairly normal in comparison. In a strange way, I felt as if something so horrific explained every other weird occurrence. So I started reeling. The hook was firmly attached to a human finger. Then, an arm. It was pale and badly bruised. Could it have been a murder? Pulling the damn thing up became heavy, so I gave the rod to my grandpa. He got to the shoulder when the whole thing went downhill super fast. Instead of the arm being severed, or even connected to a body, there was just more arm. That wasn't a shoulder, it was just another elbow. He kept pulling. The thing emerged from the water like a snake. No matter how hard we pulled, it was never all the way out of the water. How deep even was this river? I counted all the joints I could see, not including the wrist and fingers. There were at least 20. We sat there in silence, watching the hooked arm laying flat on the grass. I truly felt my sanity depleting. I extended my arm to do something, but panicked. My grandpa understood though. He stepped forward and grabbed the damn thing's hand. Gently, he raised it up, found the hook, and began unhooking it. When the hook was about halfway out, the arm twitched. My grandpa screamed bloody murder. He just tore the whole hook out, leaving a bloody mess on the hand, which continued spazzing out. I reacted quickly and kicked the whole damn thing back into the water. A huge splash echoed across the clearing, and then a tree branch snapped, loudly. I whipped my head around. There was nothing. The foliage was shaking, like somebody was running through it, but there was nothing. I was torn out of my trance by my grandpa. He hastily threw our rods and some other equipment into the car, and we climbed in after, slamming the doors with incredible force. We left the fish bucket behind. We tore through the bushes, not even looking where the road was. We drove for what seemed like hours, and finally emerged back into a field. The field we came from. I started crying again. My grandpa comforted me. He patted my shoulder and softly spoke to me in kind words, but I noticed his eyes were glazed over and watery. My phone buzzed. I looked at it, and immediately went into another panic. It's 6 a.m.? What? Look, my phone. It says it's 6 a.m. I shoved my phone into his face. I guess this was his breaking point, as tears streamed down his face. I don't understand. We were only there for 3 hours. It was 4 p.m. when we left. We kept on talking, but I'm ashamed to say I wasn't listening. I had over 30 missed calls, almost all from my mom, some from my dad. Called them both back. Both of them were in tears. I told them we got lost on our way back, hopelessly lost, ended up in a whole nother city. They bought it. They were just glad we made it back safe. My parents were furious with my grandpa for about 3 days, getting us lost like that. How dare he? Luckily, they noticed how shaken up he was by the whole thing and apologized, leaving him alone. Felt so guilty. I had nightmares for weeks after that. Pale white, bruised hands reaching out for me from the abyss, but they never could reach me. They just kept extending. My grandpa still goes fishing sometimes, although considerably less. He never goes alone. He never strays from the popular fishing spots where there is always multiple people. I've asked to come along again, but he won't let me. He doesn't want to talk about it. I'm sad. Our relationship is still good, but it feels like there's a strain that wasn't there before. Tried to go back to that place. Took my bike and rode it all the way over there, only to get lost in a lush forest and eventually give up. Sometimes there wouldn't even be a forest. Only a rich, vast field split through the middle by a river as blue as sapphires.